Hello everyone, Irini again for you, streaming from Oslo. And you already know me, but for those who don't know me yet, um, my name suggests that I might bring the energy of a womb to create more peace in this world. That's what at least means Irini, and also relates to what I think is one of the vocations I have in this lifetime: to educate, to support people, to write about my thoughts and about other realities that I see around me. Sometimes I also play the therapist or the artist, so many names. And I also like to be called a modern witch sometimes, or a priestess, depends on the situation. As I love rituals and ceremonies of all sorts. I love dancing. I love writing and connecting with people. And speaking about connecting, today I bring you a guest. Hi, Joshua. Nice to have you here. And I'm in Europe, but he's on the other side of the ocean, near Oregon, you said, right?
Yes.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I do talk therapy using internal family systems, and I have a book coming out on June 15th, the Religion Unburdened by Belief, and so that's why I reached out to Irini because I was hoping to have a discussion about what she's doing and how it might relate to the topics I cover in my book.
Yeah, I think we have something in common, actually. We already had a brief talk, and it seems that your book it's something about I'm speaking a lot, sometimes maybe too much, maybe I bore people. But one of my favorite topics is trauma. And you have a different approach to religious and spiritual movements from this perspective of the therapist, who probably through the practice you had started to understand what are all these religious and spiritual movements that hide something behind. In my opinion, many of them are survival strategies at the collective level. But I would like to know your perspective as you are writing and publishing this book about this topic.
Mhm. What do you mean by survival strategies at the collective level? Like, what's the threat? And can you just say more about that?
So the idea is that a survival strategy, at least from a trauma informed perspective, is a mechanism of coping with an event that is traumatic. And we all, as human beings, as individuals, we all can go through these events, traumatic events, and develop after these events a survival strategy. Because at the moment when trauma happens, there is a split in the psyche, and then, of course, to be able to survive it, we need to create a reality or an idea or a pattern or a behavior that helps us survive. And this is from the theory of the IOPT method I've studied, the identity oriented psychotrauma therapy, but is widely accepted also in general in the territory of trauma, to say like that. Now, when we speak about the collective, it's a little bit different because the collective means many people together, right? And we don't speak about the collective only today. We speak about collective 2,000 years ago when Christianity, for example, was created, or even before this when all the other religions or movements have started. And the collective is a sum of individuals. So the same, each individual has its own trauma survival strategy. The collective also will sum the survival strategies of individuals. And human beings in general, they have this tendency to aggregate, to create community. And this is valid also for their own beliefs and for the way they relate to reality. And many of their coping mechanisms are creating to make this feel to generate this sense of belonging to something, but also of having something in common, a certain belief, for example, or a community where they can pray together, or a community where they can have some practices like ceremonies, because in spirituality sometimes it's less dogmatic than religion, but still there are some practices that you might find common traits. So the collective also has these strategies, but as it is a collective, they manifest as a group or a community, and they show patterns. I didn't investigate it into religion and spirituality, but it's my own observation and making sense of what I've learned by working also with people and with their own trauma background.
Sure, sure. So it sounds like the thread is feeling isolated. Like that's like at social level, many people have this feel uncomfortable with isolation, and then they come together, and that's how you
Yeah,
see
that is
the.
one aspect probably. Yeah,
Mm,
to make sense and come together into something that is common to many people. But the behaviors are different. So, and you can see this also in different types of religions and how they are propagated, and also what kind of beliefs they share, because they
yeah.
are different from some spiritual movements, for example.
Yeah. Well, that relates to something that I touch upon in the book is like a spectrum between religious traditions that are more mystery focused. They're interested in questioning, interested in having experiences and understanding experiences, having their perspectives challenged. And then on the other side, religious traditions that have are more about answering questions, about uh, having like a sacred text or something that you'd memorize, where the challenging ideas is not welcome, where it's mostly about memorization, and there's kind of less ability to adapt to cultural change. And that, like this spectrum is useful because you can, without really understanding a tradition in detail, you can kind of gauge roughly where they sit on the spectrum. For example, in Judaism, there's the ultra orthodox side, where authority is vested in the rabbis, and there are many strict rules to follow. And then in contrast, there's Reform Judaism, which is more on the mystery side, where the rabbis have less authority, and everyone is asked to develop their own moral sense. In my book is advocates for the mystery side, but that's just like a way of assessing where religion stands on, or tradition stands in this spectrum.
Mm. Yeah, from my own experience, I was raised and baptized as Orthodox, but then later in life I became a pagan. Now I am into shamanism. So I have a kind of spiritual practice, but I'm very free. So I'm not bounded to any specific tradition, and even I can create my own beliefs and ways of relating with this reality that some people call God, some people call spirit. For me, is a field of consciousness. Is what I relate with, because I also work with family constellation, and they speak about the morphic field, and how we are connecting as human beings with the field and so on. So knowing and having a little bit of experience from the Orthodox tradition, and then looking also to other traditions like Protestant or Catholic, if I should compare, or even Islamism, I've always been curious since very young, and I actually read a lot. For example, you might know already the treatises of the history and philosophy of religions by Mircea Eliade, who, by the way, is quite well known and was Romanian. He was a professor in Boston at a certain moment of his life. Now he's dead. So he explains a lot about these beliefs and the history and evolution of these religions and spirituality in general, and observing the differences and also similarities between them. One trait that I think is interesting to comment on and to look into also from a trauma-informed perspective is this notion of transcendence. Because most of these religions, independent on what they believe, it's the Trinity or it's just the mother and child, or I'm just giving example, or they just have a guru that is the supreme truth speaker or things like that. Most of them, they have at their core this basic need of humankind to transcend reality, because they give hope for this transcendence. And of course, many speak about heaven and the words we are going after death, and then we will be punished for our sins if we don't behave, and blah blah blah, things like that. But this is a little bit of mythology also, because you can believe or not in this, independently of you, if you want to have or not religious practice. But this feeling and also the interpretation of transcendence, for me, comes from a basic need and a primary need of humankind as a collective, to feel that there is a meaning for this life, and that there is something beyond what our eyes can see and experience. But that also comes from a certain sense of threat and feeling not so safe with the reality itself, because it's a harsh reality, and it has always been, right? We have wars after 2000 of years of Christianity, for example. We still have abuses, and even more than ever, I mean, statistics show how many women are killed by their ex-husband, or children that are mutilated, or whatever that happens, that is very heavy for us. So in reality, if you look around, reality doesn't feel safe yet. It didn't feel safe, not in those times, at the dawn of our humanity. There were harsh conditions of living. And there was a need to find a support somewhere that can give hope, that can give something that we feel we are not alone, and actually we can rely on something. But unfortunately, because of the survival strategies that are in place, that thing, that reality, became something outside of us. That's why I'm speaking about transcendence, because it's something that it is considered to transcend our body, to transcend our immediate environment, and go somewhere to have access to it. And of course, you can use intermediates like the Pope, or a priest, or a guru, or then you use prayer, a practice that puts you in this transcendent state. But in reality, also, this shows, in my opinion, that there is a disconnect. And there is a difficulty in staying present with reality and with the body. And then automatically you get in the survival mode and say, okay, I find something else to grab on and to have this sense of stability and safety. How do you see this transcendent concept? Do you speak about it in the book?
Yes, I think what you're getting at is there's an ambiguity in the language we use for transcendence. So in like the word, we could just stay with that word, transcend. One way to interpret it is to go into an alternate reality and like disconnect from consensus reality. That's one way to interpret it. Another way to interpret it is that it's more of like as self-development. So you would suppose you notice that you often got angry and you wanted to transcend that. You could try to understand which part of you was getting angry and why, and try to help that part of you feel have its needs met through understanding it better and helping it to express itself in a healthier way. So there's this ambiguity in personal development, in the language that we use to describe personal development, where in one interpretation, it's about splitting and splitting ourselves into good and evil and trying to push away the evil side. From another interpretation, it's about trying to understand all our parts. So instead of good and evil, we would try to spend more time with the parts of us that have bad behavior, that we understand less well, and try to help those parts find a healthier expression of behavior and have a more harmonious inner experience. How does that resonate for you?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting approach. Yes. And I agree with the split parts. We are in so many parts nowadays. They're just collecting them and bringing them together is just a lifetime, a huge effort. But I think it's worth it to do it anyway.
Mm.
What other concept do you speak about in the book? I just gave the example of transcendence, but maybe there is something else. I don't know. For example, ritual abuse. Do you approach this ritualic abuse topic regarding to spiritual or religious movements?
Well, that's like that's a big jump from transcendence to ritual abuse.
Yeah.
So like in can you just say a bit more about that? Like where do you see like an example of ritual abuse or like usually these kind of situations would happen because there's a power imbalance. Like there's, it's someone who regards themselves as a teacher who has some greater insight and then is putting a student through, difficult challenges.
Yeah, well, most of the times I think involves sexual abuse, if I'm not wrong.
Mm,
There were some stories, for example, in Vatican a few years ago. There in Italy, they discovered that in some convents there were some abuses towards younger priests from those
mm,
of the higher in hierarchy. And we had a polemic like this also in Romania in the Orthodox Church in a seminary institution where they were teaching students to become priests also, where they were also abused by the archbishop actually and his supporter. And I've heard other stories in America mostly of some cults. So in this case, it was not church, but a kind of community where they practice something that is more or less religious, where they actually were performing ritual abuse using sexual abuse over children or teenagers, like
mm,
part of their own practices or something like that. And I'm
mm,
not sure to which extent everything is true. So, because of course, when these kind of abuses are discovered, they are quite mediatized, and there's a lot the press speaking about it in mass media. But I
mm-hmm,
think this is just an example of how very rigid hierarchy or even dogmas in certain ways. I mean, also in practice, not only in belief. When people who are in charge are not healed, are still carrying their own trauma, this can trigger and create background for traumatization further over those that are lower in the hierarchy. Because here it's really about abuse from those in power over those who have less power. And this can
mm,
go through ritual or through certain practices too. So probably, I don't know if you approach this topic, but this can actually show the difference between the reality, the abuse itself, and the facade, the way that the institution itself, like in this case can be the church, will protect the abuser or the abused. Because sometimes
mm,
there is a choice to be made. And this becomes
right.
relevant when everything is uncovered, because in many
Mm-hmm,
cases the institution chose to protect the abuser, for example.
right, right.
So to
And
fight this abuse. Yeah.
to connect that to your previous point, like a lot of these instances of sexual misconduct, a contributing factor is that the people in authority figure, in positions of authority, they don't have a healthy relationship with those parts of themselves that are, a natural human drive is sexuality, and the Catholic Church has been contributing to this problem with their and I guess also Jainism, I suppose, is also has a rule about um, disallowing priests to have sexual relations, and so this kind of forced abstinence can uh, doesn't necessarily have the intended results, but can result in kind of like a splitting where people are shamed for their sexual impulses, and then they find secret ways of getting those needs met that are, very harmful.
Yeah. Well, but this is rarity, right? And then it can be
Mhm.
covered or uncovered.
Yeah,
It's also
yeah.
a matter of personal responsibility, but when the institution uncovers it, then it becomes a matter of institutional responsibility. And I think it's much more, how to say, relevant than something is not okay in the institution itself, or in the rules, or in the prescriptions and hierarchy they created. And then I was thinking, for example, to ask you about another topic that for me is very interesting, the witch hunt. What do you think about the witch hunt that the Inquisition for so many centuries supported? And actually, it was a mass extinction of many women who in reality were not witches at all. They were helping people with their gifts, but the Inquisition apparatus created this persecution movement
Hmm.
to
Yeah,
bring them to. What do you think? What is the, because this is also, in my opinion, a survival mode from authority towards those that are weaker, but at the same time, they are feared because they have some power in their own skills and abilities. And in this case, they were most of them were women.
sure, sure. I mean, this is an example of Christianity at its most rigid and cruel and violent. It's really a disgraceful period of how the Catholic tradition, it's it's that's that level of rigidity is, um, hopefully we don't have to return to that, and we can um, prefer more mystery loving practices in the future.
Speak more about this and how this
What's that?
relates to internal family system, the mystery approach, how this relates with internal family system.
Oh, I see. Well, so for your list, like I know you are familiar with this distinction, but just for your listeners, let me explain what I mean by blended and unblended, because this is really the crux of it. And so in internal family systems, we're trying to, like, the one of the goals is to have more self-leadership, and what that means is that we we try to develop a relationship with our parts so that they don't feel the need to blend. What it means when a part blends is, like, suppose I have a part that is has very a lot of anxiety about being interviewed. If I allow this part to take over, then my mind might go blank. I might freeze up. I wouldn't know what to say. So uh, what I'm trying to do is stay unblended from this part. So I still feel its anxiety. I still see how uneasy it is about being interviewed, but I can reassure it. I can let it know, we've done this before. You don't have to take over, and try to understand that part's concerns and address them. And then as I'm uh, understanding and addressing the part's concerns, then it will develop more trust in my leadership, and allowing me to live more from a place of self-leadership, and become less blended with my parts. So that's um, the key the key move in internal family systems, to live more from mystery, which I think is aligned with this idea of self-leadership. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I like the fact that you touch into self-leadership because it's one of my predilect topics when I do trainings, and I always think that many forms of therapy, and especially trauma therapy and internal family system, is part of the branch of trauma therapy because it touches in the split and how you can bring the parts together. Um, One goal, to call it like that, I don't even know if I'm using the right word, of all what we're doing in this field or area is to get back to the self, to get that wholeness that we want as a human being, and to attain self leadership. But relating this notion of self leadership and also the reality around it, because it's not so easy to be done as it is to say it, right?
Yeah,
You
for
can
sure.
work a lot on this, especially if you were conditioned to not think that you have power or that you are not the leader of your life and someone else will lead you all the time. If we relate this with religious and some spiritual movement that pretend to lead you from afar or from a shorter distance, but somehow to give you guidance to show you what means leadership, right? What will be your approach to this? Because many religions, if they are going to fail, for the moment I see they are still striving, most of them. But if they are going to fail, is because more people will step into self leadership and will understand they don't need religion to give them that power or that confidence.
So you're saying there's
What do
like
you
some
think about
perverse
it?
incentive. Well, I'm not sure which. So you're saying that religions have this perverse incentive to keep their followers dependent and not develop their self-leadership. Is that what you're
To a
saying?
certain extent, yes, I believe so.
Okay. Um, yeah, I mean that I guess that's out there. But like that's very kind of a destructive dynamic. Like so before we got into that, you were asking me like suppose I want to become or want to develop more self-leadership, how can I do that in a way that suppose uh, I have to contend with two two challenges. Like on the outside, there could be misdirection from religious institutions, and on the inside, I could believe that I'm developing self leadership, but then fall into self delusion, like that I'm not. I'm think I'm developing it, but I'm actually not. So are those the challenges that you were trying to touch on, or?
Well, it's up to you to consider it a challenge or not. But if we look objectively to what
Yeah.
religion promotes, it's still a very hierarchical structure of thinking and doing. You have a
Uh-huh.
supreme authority, and then you have a certain hierarchy, and then from that, and they are intermediating between you, this yourself, or the
Yeah.
community of selves, and that God or that spirit or whatever we
Right.
call it, right? So,
Right.
where in this structure, that is the real question here for you, where in this structure and hierarchy do you see self leadership for each of us? If we are part of this
Um,
community of believers, where
well, I mean
it stands
that's
and how you build self leadership if you always rely on that God and on this hierarchy.
yeah. So that's definitely one of the themes of the book that I wrote is to try to give people more autonomy and like be able to navigate this themselves. And well, I try to make it simple as suppose you have a goal to become stronger, to lift weights. So like if you go to the gym, then you put on however many 20 pounds or whatever, and then you lift it or you don't lift it. So you get like honest feedback about your development, and then you can accurately measure how close you are to your goals. Like to make it as simple as that. That's what I'm aspiring to do in my book, to make self-development as predictable and reliable as possible.
Nice. I think we're getting quite round now. It's more than half an hour of discussion.
Yep.
Would you like
Sure.
to speak a little bit about the launch of the book and how people can access it? Because I think it's worth it to read it. I'm also curious about it. just a few words about it before we close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the book has a website. You can browse to it. It's unburdened.biz, B-I-Z. And yeah, there's a bunch of pages. I've put a lot of work into the website, so I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, Irini, maybe after you get a chance to look at the book, then maybe we can chat again about that.
Yes, but we could also put the website in the description of this
Okay,
interview here, so people can
sure.
access it directly. And also, maybe you want to share with them, I don't know, anything else you are preparing, other projects, or your contact details will also be available in the description. But if you
Mm-hmm.
want to, before we close it, to share anything else, you are free to do it.
Okay, well, so the book is I always stumble over that, autobiographical in a sense that I've practiced all the techniques that I talk about, and um, in the there's in particular one technique with the firmness, the way that firmness is developed in this ceremonial space, like that's something that I practice, and the way I see it is it's a way of practicing being present with someone under intense challenge. So that's something that I bring to my talk therapy practice, and if you want to work with me, uh, then I'm available.
Nice. I'm happy that I met you. It was a very interesting conversation. I'm sure we could continue for hours, but I think we gave a taste to our listeners about the topic of your book and how interesting and rich could be to read it. So I encourage all of you to check the website and take a look. And then connect with Joshua if you want to know more about internal family system or other forms of therapy that he practices. I think he has a lot of wisdom and experience to share with you. Thank you again for watching. I also want to encourage you again to subscribe. You are helping me, my channel, and then you can get notification about future content. Like and share this episode on your platforms if you deem is worthy. Thank you and see you next. Bye bye. Thank you again, Joshua, for being here with us.
Yep. Well,